No swearing.
Yeah, moderate swearing.
We can just edit in a lot of beeps.
Beeps are fun, but I think you maximize your audience by minimizing the swearing, and then obviously if you've got a very sweary audience, we can always swear more.
And if you really want to swear,
it's easier to go up on the swearing
than
down.
than down.
Yeah, I like that.
You think so? We'll see.
I think so.
We'll have to.
We'll
just
see
find
who our
out.
audience is when we find them.
We might get an audience with swearing.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think this is a fun topic.
Okay.
Did you guys see the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie?
No.
Mutant
not.
Mayhem.
No, I didn't.
And it's honestly the best animated movie that I've seen in a very long time.
Really?
And it wasn't even nominated for Best Animated Feature last year.
Interesting.
But the art is phenomenal. The script was insane.
Is it animated or CG?
It's CG,
Okay.
but it's not like trying to be Disney animation.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the new Spider-Man animated movies,
Okay.
where it's like doing its own animated style kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the multiverse one.
Yeah, not quite like that. It almost had kind of a claymation look to it,
Interesting.
but Seth Rogen wrote it, I believe, and produced it.
Interesting.
One of the best things they did, I mean, the cast was incredible. It's all like A-list actors,
Right.
Except for the 4 turtles,
Nice.
who they just cast for teenage boys.
Oh,
And they
interesting.
didn't record them separately. They put them all in a room
Oh,
and
interesting.
just let them hang out. And so a lot of the scenes of them just like busting each other's balls and
Really?
playing and
Actual
making
dudes
fun of
just
each
hanging
other
out.
and was just them hanging out. So there's a lot of
Amazing.
scenes that feel like this is so real, this couldn't have been written.
Yeah.
And it's because it wasn't. They just let these kids just
That's funny.
hang out and have fun.
Huh.
So it's awesome, it's heartfelt, and my kids
Loved it.
They absolutely loved it.
That's
Interesting.
awesome.
6-year-old girl, 2.5-year-old girl, and they adore it. They play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The only thing that my eldest wanted, like the only present that she very specifically asked for her birthday, was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys.
Wow.
Yeah, and they have like little cardboard shells that my wife made them that they
That's
wear around.
awesome.
Who
And,
is the
and the
villain
cr-
in the movie?
Superfly.
Shredder, right?
Superfly.
Shredder
Wow.
is introduced at like the post-credit scene. Spoilers. Sorry.
Right. Gotcha. To like be like, hey,
Yeah,
the next one's gonna
yeah.
be the one you know about.
Interesting.
But Superfly and Ice Cube voice Superfly.
Wow.
Oh, I thought
Which
you meant
is
Ice Cube
So,
as himself.
have
He's
you-
also the second villain.
Have either of you rewatched any of the '90s Turtles?
Well, so
Yeah,
we've been
cartoon?
I started them on that.
Okay, I've been
with
wondering
the,
if
like-
it would hold up.
I thought it did.
Okay,
Dude, I just
I
love
mean,
when they
it's-
go back to like ancient, like China. It's China.
they
right?
do all sorts of things. Yeah.
Japan because
Japan.
of the Foot Clan,
Yes, yeah.
which is so funny. So little, and maybe this is widely known. I don't know. I didn't get into the Turtles that much when I was a kid because I was all in on Wild West Cowboys and Moo Mesa, which were, this was all part of that same line of late 80s, early 90s cartoons about mutant animals.
Yes.
But I don't know. I want to say that I had heard that Marvel kind of made this canonically true. But my understanding was that the creators of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had set it up to where the ooze that turns them into
Yeah.
the Teenage Mutant Ninja
Yeah.
Turtles is the same chemical that's spilled by the same accident that covers Matt Murdock and turns him into Daredevil.
Interesting.
So like the
Oh,
same accident
I had never
creates
heard that.
Daredevil and the
I didn't know
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I didn't know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was Marvel.
It's not. They
Oh.
just
We're like,
they just made
what
it
if
that
it's
way.
not
But
the
it's
same
like
news.
the
Oh,
hand
okay.
the Foot Clan in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is like the hand.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Wasn't it the Hand Clan or something?
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Daredevil.
Hand, foot, and mouth.
Yeah.
Hand, foot, and mouth clans.
My favorite of the monstrous animal people ones was Street Sharks for sure, though.
For sure.
Just-
I honestly don't think I ever
remember.
watched it,
I
but
don't think
just
know
for
if
the
I-
toys alone.
Yes, the toys were incredible, and I did watch.
Oh,
the
those
show a
super
little bit.
jacked sharks.
The
Yeah,
super
with the
jacked
giant
sharks, that
heads.
made no
Yes.
sense, and the heads were way too big,
Yeah.
and it was just the most nonsensical
That came out as the time with the little like fairies that you would just like
Yeah.
pull thing, their little
Yeah.
wings would fly.
Yep.
I remember
Yep.
the commercials.
Those were
for
there.
it.
The 90s were.
I do feel like the Gargoyles
best.
show was that same vibe, but
Dude,
like trying
what
to
was
be
even
very
going
serious.
on in
that
Gargoyles?
show was so bad.
Gargoyles? Like what is
I don't
it?
know. I kind of loved it,
I
but
couldn't
partially
ever get into it.
I partially loved it though because at the time I wasn't allowed to get into it.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
Well,
one
it's
of
definitely
those
one of
like
those.
this
And
is
it also
demonic
this is
shows.
going to be we know this is going to be a common theme. Steven likes darker stuff,
Sure.
and it definitely was like
It is
over
darker.
the top, grim dark, the
Yes.
gargoyles.
Big
Yeah.
guy.
I just always
Fly
felt it
around.
was so slow.
It's definitely slow. It's especially compared to the similarly animated. Like I
Yeah,
think it was the same team that was doing like the Batman,
Batman, I believe so.
animated show.
and the Black Sea. What was that? The Sailors on the Black Sea or something, which was
I
also
don't
kind of
remember
slow,
that
but I
one.
think that one actually was supposed to hold up pretty well.
What
I
a
do not
magic
remember.
time, dude! There's
Great
nothing like it
cartoons.
anymore.
I kind
There's
of want to
nothing
watch
like it anymore.
Gargoyles
Well,
now.
and you mentioned the CG thing. I sent you guys earlier that little video of the Kung Fu Panda done as
Yeah.
drawings. It made me so angry that everything is CG now instead of. It really all just looks better as drawings.
Like
Not that all
colors,
CG
yeah.
is bad. It's
No.
just
It's
like man,
There's-
it's
the unfortunate thing. I think is there's room for both.
there is room for both.
There's room for both,
But
and
we
there
get
was.
too much of the one. I feel like.
Well, we get all of the one. I mean,
Yeah,
unless
no,
you're
that's
watching
fair.
like outside of Studio Ghibli or
Yeah.
there's I'm forgetting the name of it, but that Irish studio that did the Book of Kells, and unless it's an indie studio, you're not getting hand drawn
Yeah.
stuff anymore. And we can bookmark this for another discussion, but I think that if they had hand drawn Wish,
Yeah.
Improvements.
it would have been a massive improvement.
Yeah.
Dang.
Hello, and Michael Vannon. We are Steven.
Sam.
And Daniel.
And this is Under Towers Podcast, your library of all things nerdy, especially sci-fi fantasy, and especially books. And this is our first episode.
Hello.
We've been talking about this
Yeah.
for almost exactly a year. We started
Yeah.
our book club
Yes.
a year ago, May.
We had such a good time talking. We thought other people would like it too.
Because that's just what the world needed was another group
podcast.
of white guys with a podcast.
We have things to say.
So
And it's
this
a lot
being
like other things that people have said.
this being the first episode, listener, we are going to be kind of giving you guys an intro to us, and our likes and what got us into book reading, what got us into sci-fi fantasy, and just a springboard for the rest of this podcast as we go forward. We've known each other
Long time.
a long time.
Yeah.
Sam,
Long time.
I met first.
Yeah, I was 10. You were not.
No, I think it was either 98 or 99. I can't remember when we started
Yeah.
going to Smyrna Assembly. It was,
Okay.
so I was
Maybe I was
either
9 then.
I was 9 or 10. I think I was 9.
I would have been 8 then. 'cause I'm
Yeah,
33 now, and you're.
and it was the Sunday that we went to try out that church, and my folks wanted to stay for the new people meeting,
Right.
and my sister and I were hanging out on the playground, and you and your sister came and introduced yourselves, and we just started playing, and that was that.
Yep.
And then it was only about 2 years later,
Yeah,
I think
that something about that.
that
yeah.
you guys started coming,
Mhm.
and the rest is history. We've kind of been together ever since.
Basically.
Quite the origin story.
Yeah. Well, and what's fun is not really much has changed, except more alcohol.
Yes. None when we were kids.
I guess we don't play on church playgrounds anymore.
Not as
Not
often.
after.
Not
for
as
sure.
often.
Yeah.
Not as often for sure.
But before we get into all that, let's talk about some news. This being our first episode, we don't exactly have our release schedule nailed down. So by the time you're listening to this, none of this may be news, but this is what is exciting as of Monday, April 22nd, 2024. First up, Book 3 of the Bloodsworn trilogy, The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, is finally going to be released October 22nd. We're going to be reading your guys' first John Gwynne books. We're going to be reading The Faithful and the Fallen in June.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
Bloodsworn Saga, or Bloodsworn Trilogy, excuse me, is his latest series of books, and it's all set in Norse mythology, and he had written the first 2 books. Unfortunately, a family tragedy happened, and he is now releasing his 3rd book.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
desperately
Okay.
excited about that. I adore his other work, and I have specifically not started reading the Bloodsworn trilogy because the cliffhanger at the end of book 2 is supposed to be pretty gnarly. So I'll be reading those this summer as well. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch this yet, but today the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer dropped, the official full trailer.
No.
And
I haven't.
fellas, I honestly don't remember the last time I was this excited about a superhero movie.
Interesting.
Like, I've kind of been done. I've
Yeah,
kind of been done
But
for a minute,
is
to
Hugh
be
Jackman
frank.
like
I'm
super
done.
ripped yet again?
I'm sure they didn't show any shirtless scenes. I mean, I hope
He's
that
got to have one.
he's got the
Okay.
old school yellow and blue costume, so
Right.
they may have designed it so that
Interesting.
he
Kinda
doesn't have
just
to
see
like
it all.
get his arms jacked, and then maybe
Yeah.
doesn't have to worry about some of the other stuff
Get
so much.
jacked like Jack.
Sam, you're just
Uh,
worried about how jacked he is.
I am.
Yeah.
Well, mostly because this is probably his last hurrah after the last hurrah he had.
Yeah.
So
He'll just be too decrepit to ever do another movie.
maybe his jack is all that.
So
what
I've
other role is he going to take that's supposed to be super buff and like 65 plus?
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, so
Druss.
did you?
He
Did
can
you
be
I
Druss.
was actually
He can
just thinking the
freaking
same
be
thing.
Druss, yeah.
Actually, Jackman
Oh,
as
damn.
Druss is actually not a bad idea.
I don't-
Especially if he's
yeah.
jacked and shirtless.
Okay. wow.
I'm okay with that. I'm
Yeah.
100% okay.
Side
with
note,
that.
that was casting as Druss in Legend by David Gemmell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Which
so
you agree?
so good.
Like we want to
Yeah.
see a shirtless Jackman as Druss. That would be
Oh
nice.
yeah, standing on the walls
White-haired,
of Dross Delnock with
gray-haired.
a
Yeah.
giant double-headed
Okay.
axe. I really
Completely,
like it.
I'm completely heterosexual, but I want to see.
Yeah,
what
no, we
God's
all
clothes
do.
on.
We all do.
And a
Anybody
giant
that says they
axe.
don't is lying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's terribly exciting. That's coming July 22nd is when the movie's going to release. Next little bit, we got 2 pieces of tabletop RPG news. First being that a Planet of the Apes RPG is coming from Magnetic Press Play.
What?
It brings storylines and characters from the original films and the rebooted trilogy. You
So
can
the
play
Dawn
as
of the Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
yeah, which are so good.
They are.
And
They-
here's
they
the,
should
here's
work on the
but,
titles,
but also
though.
here's
The
the
titles
thing.
are wild.
The thing for me, there's a few franchises, Godzilla, King Kong, Planet of the Apes, being 3 of the biggest ones that for me personally, it does not matter how good or terrible the movie is. I'm going to watch it
Right. 'Cause,
and I'm gonna love it.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how
Like
bad
the
it
Planet
is.
of the Apes.
Well, I should
ones
say
are
that I've
great.
never seen the new one.
The good thing
You
is
haven't
with
the Planet
that,
of the Apes?
No.
the new
They're-
ones
they're
are
quite good.
genuinely good.
That's what I've heard.
They're
I
genuinely good.
I don't know. I've just not been interested. But I do love the original.
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
the opposite. I don't like the original. I like the new
Really?
ones, yeah.
But I
Which is,
even,
I guess,
but
sacrilege.
see, my thing is, I even love the whatever it was, the early 2000s, I think, in the late 90s, the Wahlberg,
that really bad
the
one?
Mark Wahlberg
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Absolutely love
That
it.
was really bad.
Adore it. It's terrible.
It's so
the
bad.
makeup though
Is
is
good?
some of the
It is
best makeup you'll ever see.
It is good.
So in this, you can play as apes, human slaves, or dissident mutants.
Why would you play as slaves?
I
Sounds
guess if
fun.
you wanted to
I'm
playing
Revolt?
like a breaking out kind of
Like,
thing.
how do you build a tribe of
I
slaves?
misheard it and thought there was humans and human slaves as options. I was like, that's a weird distinction.
No, just only human slaves. So this is all taking place. This is all taking place
Listen, I
after
built
the
up
apes
my
take
slave clan out of other slaves. Does that make you the slave version?
So, Magnetic Press founder Mike Kennedy says Planet of the Apes is, without question, one of the greatest science fiction franchises ever. It is not only an exciting high concept, but it does what great sci-fi does best, holding a mirror up to society. The Planet of the Apes RPG will contain all of that political intrigue while also giving players a vast and dangerous world to explore, full of brand new mysteries and adventures to experience firsthand.
Political intrigue. I
So-
wonder if it's going to be like some deforestation in there too. That was
Maybe.
Did we look at that when I sent you? I saw this really funny thing of like looking at Sauron from the lens of like,
Oh,
a
well, I think I
politician.
sent it. I don't
Oh,
know.
did you send
Yeah,
that?
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
No, that was
remember
very funny.
That was so great.
That
It's
was
like
that was very funny.
Saruman's deforestation of Isengard.
Yeah.
Really great.
But Sauron keeping up with the environment of the swamplands,
Yes.
like repurposing the corpses out there for
That was very
natural
funny.
habitat. Good.
So that's one piece.
You
The
did,
next one.
you did send that. I don't know why I
Yeah.
thought I did.
That's all right.
Classic.
It's the same. It doesn't matter. So the second piece of RPG news that is the most exciting for me is that the Black Company is getting a new RPG from Delta Green Publishers, Arc Dream. I've not played Delta Green. I guess it's kind of like a
Is it
more.
a new RPG? Like they
I guess
have
it's
one?
well. So I have that one that was like I think 3.5 edition D&D supplement.
Oh,
Not a
okay.
supplement, but like
Gotcha,
a rule set that you play with D&D. This is an all new one published by Arc Dream. Arc Dream co-founder Shane Ivey said in a press release, "I've been enthralled by the Black Company since the first books came out. This is the thrill of a career. We're writing the fantasy game that we've always wanted to play." And his partner Dennis Detwiller added, "Shane and I have long considered creating a dark fantasy game, and Delta Green always wanted a twisted, crazed little brother. The Black Company is a perfect fit." And they're already saying that so the game rulebook is going into playtesting. There's no date for it to come out, which that's fine. Test it all you need. But they've already said that they have a boatload of supplements, adventures, and other source books from the rest of the book series post the Books of the North already planned.
So
it's a big
RPG
thing.
like a tabletop?
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so definitely stoked for that. As we'll talk about here in a few, Black Company is one of my favorite book series of all time. So very excited to see it get some love. And then my final little bit of news is that Fallout from Amazon has been confirmed for season 2,
Yeah.
as it should have been, because
Right.
that show
It's fucking awesome.
it's fucking awesome. Here we're gonna use an
It's
F word.
worth it.
I have no idea how many hours I've sunk into Fallout.
So many. Same, so many.
between
Have you played it?
I
Or watch the show.
started in 3 with Fallout 3.
Yeah.
I think it was 2008.
Yeah.
Um,
It was like after Oblivion had its like.
Yep.
And they're like, wait, we have this.
Yep. And then played New Vegas,
Yep.
and
same.
then 4. And I adore it. I adore the world.
Didn't
and
NCR happen in between that, or was
the
that
NCR
Vegas?
was in New Vegas.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to watch the show. So I'm not going to say anything
Absolutely.
particular about the show. But the one thing that I want to bring up, we'll talk about this on a different episode when we have a discussion that we need to have about adaptations, because it's right up there with The Last of Us as far as like a perfect video game adaptation.
Surprising.
I heard,
Yeah.
I heard quite a
Everything.
few people say they thought it was better.
Then the game. I think
Than
it
the
captured
game?
everything.
Then The Last of Us, I
Then the
think
adaptation.
there's a lot
No
of
adaptation.
there's a lot of
Yeah. To be fair, it is a completely new story, whereas
Yes.
Last of Us is just
Last
the
of Us
story.
is this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would almost argue in some ways that Last of Us is a better adaptation because it is a straight up
If you stick
adaptation.
to what the meaning.
Yeah.
Of that
Whereas
is, yeah.
Fallout is a perfect reinterpretation of the world and an entirely new story set in it.
Isn't it nice to see Amazon do something good
Yeah.
with something like that?
Great
source
when
material.
they nail it, they nail it.
Things that are good.
Yeah.
The
They've-
Outer Range is the best thing
to be
I've
more
watched from
specific,
Amazon.
after the hype of Rings of Power coming into the hype of Fallout,
Oh yeah.
I was like, wow, this totally. I was not expecting this to be.
Well,
good.
one thing that
I
Fallout had
thought it
going
was
with
gonna be
it.
bad. Fallout. I thought it was
Yeah,
gonna be bad.
I felt good about it once I started seeing pictures. I was very hopeful when I heard that Walton Goggins was attached to it. The guy he plays the ghoul.
Oh,
Yeah,
I love
big
that dude.
big
yeah.
fan of Walton Goggins.
Django Unchained is what I remember.
Well, Justified is the big one.
I see. Yeah.
I've never
Okay.
seen
Justified is one of the best TV shows that has ever been, and
Is that the one
it
that's a
is
spinoff of the other HBO show?
no, but funnily enough, it's like so. Almost, it seems this is an exaggeration,
Yeah.
but it's like Deadwood ended, and the showrunners for Sons of Anarchy and Justified got together and were like, okay, Deadwood's done. We're going to split the cast. You get this guy, I
Oh,
get this
really?
guy, you get this guy, I get this guy. Because it's like everybody that was in Deadwood ended up being in one or both of those shows.
That's funny.
Also, sucks that it died.
Yeah,
It
well,
died, you know?
it's, I don't know. That show taught me how to curse. Fallout, phenomenal. Can't wait to see season 2. I'm super bummed that
it's
season
so
1
fun.
is done. Oh, the one thing I did want to mention as far as how they adapted it so well and comparing it to Last of Us is an apt comparison for this one because they're both post-apocalyptic. There is no humor in Last of Us. There's so little humor and it's so dark they literally had to put a joke book into the game and the show. Fallout in the game and the show it deals with very serious subject matter, obviously. And it gets creepy, it gets scary, it gets action packed. It's obviously wildly violent, but there's such a wicked sense of humor to the games. And they nailed that in the show.
Yeah,
it's
so funny,
hilarious.
I wish I could say some of the jokes.
So that's the news for tonight. Now on to the main event. Where we will kind of discuss what got us into reading in general and sci-fi fantasy in particular. On to tonight's main event, where we're discussing what got us into reading, and specifically sci-fi fantasy, and where that's taken us to here in our mid-30s. So, who wants to go first? Who wants to share with the class first?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I think my literal first foray into to fantasy, I guess specifically, was seeing a theater production of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was like 4. I think it was a college production in Cleveland, Tennessee, and that was the first. It actually wasn't very meaningful, but I do remember it was also the first time I'd seen theater, so that was kind of interesting. But then the one that like stuck with me forever was going to my cousin's house in Virginia, and we went down into their little like basement, and it was like, I think it was Christmas, and so there were extra people in the house, so like all the kids were like sleeping in sleeping bags in the basement, and they were watching on this tiny little TV. They were watching the Rankin Bass Hobbit movie.
Incredible.
And it was a little ways into it, but not all of the way. And I had no idea what we were watching, but I was like immediately fascinated. And I think it was around the time they go into the Misty Mountains with the goblins, maybe a little before that. Maybe the trolls actually happened, but the main thing I remember is the Gollum scene. And honestly, just being absolutely terrified. I think I was like 6 years old, and just absolutely it was definitely like very special and like it was very moving. But really, Gollum in that that Gollum is actually amazing. It's not the circus Gollum, which is wonderful, but there's something actually really special about that one. It's also very obviously not a Hobbit, which is interesting, where they did that more. But it's just like this giant frog creature, which is probably more true to the original adaptation of Tolkien, actually, when he wrote The Hobbit before he wrote Lord of the Rings. When Gollum wasn't, I don't think at first was intended to be that. He was more just like a swamp creature thing.
Are you familiar with Tove Jansson?
No.
She was the author that she wrote the Moomins.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she illustrated the Finnish edition of The Hobbit.
Okay.
And similar to the Rankin Bass version, this was like the first edition of The Hobbit, and the drawing that she did of Gollum is much more like almost like the Groke from Moomin.
Yeah.
Really tall, like swamp monster looking thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was seeing those illustrations made Tolkien realize he needed to adjust how he described Gollum. So I think that after that, for like whatever the next edition of The Hobbit was, he made some adjustments.
Well, I know he
to the
did.
Physical description of
That's
of
interesting.
Gollum.
I didn't know there were changes to his physical description, because I do know that they changed the riddles in the dark thing, and there's pretty substantial changes to make it more in line with Lord of the Rings, and it's actually added into that's actually a plot point in the Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf's talking to Frodo. But yeah, that was when I really got hooked, and I think we were talking to my parents about it and being totally fascinated. I don't remember if I fell asleep before it finished or not, but I absolutely adored it. And not long after I know my mom read to me and my siblings the Hobbit book, And that really is the first thing I can really remember really dealing with fantasy. And I'm probably forgetting something, but that's definitely it.
Well, that's a big
for
big
sure.
milestone.
Yeah.
What about reading specifically? Like you reading, because that's a big developmental jump too.
For sure. And there are a few books I got from the library that I've never been able to figure out the name of, that were the first things I read in that world. And one was I guess everybody calls it isekai nowadays, where it's a boy from our world falls into a fantasy world. And I remember thinking it was really good. It's probably not good, but maybe I'll talk about it here and then someone can help us figure out what it is. But he falls into the world and he's immediately ingratiated into a kingdom, but then those turn out to be the bad guys. And he ends up getting away from them, and he ends up having like a buddy panther animal thing, and
Nice.
He meets a princess, and then they end up taking over. And I cannot remember what it was. I
Sounds
absolutely
amazing.
loved it when I was like 8.
Yeah.
It was written for kids, but it was awesome, and I've tried to sort out what it is. I haven't actually done a Google in a while, so maybe I need to try to do that again. But
Boy falls into world meets panther.
yeah, it was great.
Well, that checks a lot of big fantasy boxes.
Yeah, and it was actually very interesting that the first people you meet, and they're not very obviously bad, but it was really interesting that like the assumption is the people that you get introduced to at first are the good guys, and then it's like very
the whole like
they're-
hotel that
they're-
you never
they're
leave.
not.
type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, that was pretty cool. But and then from there it was I read The Hobbit on my own around that time, I believe, and then I read some Redwall books.
Mhm.
On my own, and then somewhere in there I read Chronicles of Prydain and loved those, and then also read The Amazing Adventures of Sebastian, which was also a Lloyd Alexander, which isn't quite fantasy, I guess it sort of is, but that's also really good. I really love that book.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about as a teen and young adult? How did the obviously we all were homeschooled together.
Yeah.
We all took my mom's literature class. We read a boatload of books in high school.
Yes.
Were there any standout things from high school, whether in class or just reading for fun, that have stood out to you?
I mean, Lord of the Rings, of course. Seeing the films, and that was read to us.
Living
and
through
then
the
read,
release of
and then read my exactly,
pretty awesome.
being a very impressionable age. That was a big deal. And then reading those for myself shortly after was awesome. Although, like, I think about it now, it's like I really feel like, even though they're very easy to understand books, I loved it, but I also don't feel like I got it really.
Sure.
I mean, honestly, I can't. From that time period, I really didn't read a bunch from probably about like 14 or 15 on,
Mhm.
for a while.
When did that start back up for you?
Probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
Mhm.
and
After
it
you got
wasn't-
laid. Just kidding. Probably
Uh,
after I got
no,
laid.
I don't think that had anything to do with it, actually. But and honestly, it started with a book series. I started reading for fun again. We were me and my then girlfriend, now wife, were in Chicago, and my wife's a big reader, so we went to some indie bookstores, and someone there recommended a book by Brian Catling called The Vor, and so it had a really cool cover of like a wood and like a moon and sun, and it's like a fantasy alternate history of it's a 3-book series, alternate history of Africa, where there's like a magical forest.
Nice.
It's really good, but that was like the first thing I'd really like read for a while, and then the I don't think actually when I started it the 3rd book was out yet, and then I got the rest of the series, and the 2nd book in that series is actually incredible. The first is interesting, and the 3rd is insanely weird, and I don't even know if I can recommend it, but the 2nd book is very, very good.
Nice.
I say can recommend it, meaning like I just don't know if I can full-throated say this is great, but it was worth reading. But the 2nd book, I mean the 3rd book especially, was just like it's the 2nd book is the erstwhile And the third book, the name escapes me right now, but it's yeah, it was an interesting series. That was the thing I got back reading in the last few years, which I guess that's just 3 books, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Sam? Take us back to the beginning.
My very first encounter with fantasy stuff is probably The Dark Crystal.
Oh,
Sure, yeah,
that,
nice.
That really weird movie
Yeah.
with the Skeksis.
Nice. No, that's awesome.
Do you remember the Skeksis?
Yeah.
The head
Oh my
guys, the
God.
head tossing guys.
They're just like, they were weird.
The
and
head
they,
tossing
like,
guys
laughed,
was
like,
Labyrinth, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong movie.
But I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
same. It's it's Henson, so it's
Yeah.
Dude, they're like the
weird
the
not
clay
Muppet
or-
Henson.
yeah. That movie was freaking messed up, so weird, and The Last Unicorn. So those
Oh,
were
I
like
d-
my,
I did
my
love The
two
Last Unicorn.
very first fantasy, like I guess, experiences, and I think Willow too. That
Yep.
so all those movies.
I did love
Yep.
Willow.
because my brothers were quite a bit older, and they showed me all those things when I was like 6. I was
Alf.
like 6. And then Alf, of course.
Sci-fi. Yeah. it
Yeah,
is
That's
sci-fi.
sci-fi,
absolutely.
you know. Gone down in history as the worst endings of a sitcom ever. I think it's in the top 5, or used to be. Because, yeah.
Sitcom endings are like sitcoms are not about endings.
Bro, he gets
None of them
taken
not
by
are.
the
about
alien
endings.
task force and dissected.
Yeah.
Like, he literally dies, like, in his murder.
None of
That's
them
a-
are good.
It's
That's
pretty bad.
that's a pretty great ending.
Although I will,
It's grimdark, right?
I
That's
will
grimdark.
vouch for
Alf
the-
is the first grimdark.
I will vouch for this Seinfeld ending, which was panned at the time, but that's actually pretty darn good. But
I've
that's-
not watched enough Seinfeld.
Yeah.
but I'm a
It's
fan.
good. Seinfeld doesn't feel like it was ever meant to end. Just sort of like a blip.
Well, and
in
it just
the-
eventually did end. But they I mean, it's not really a spoilable show, but like they end up in this like little town and end up going to jail, and they're on trial, and the character witnesses are all the people they've like screwed over for the entire show, and then they go to jail. It's just but people hated it for whatever reason, but like I don't know, I thought that's a perfect ending.
Sopranos is my favorite hated ending.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I think it's actually I think it's a genuinely brilliant ending, and they set it up
Yeah.
several episodes earlier.
Yeah, it was quite foreshadowing
Yeah.
up to that.
Yeah.
Great
So,
show.
anyways, those incredible
shows.
movies and shows. What else?
So they got me into it, and then I think from there, the next thing I remember is Dragonheart, that movie. But
I was gonna
Hell
mention,
yeah,
when you started talking about that, I was like,
Dragonheart,
I
yes.
love Dragonheart.
but
Yes.
I only remember the trailer, and then I remember going to the movie theater to watch it. But I don't remember what happens in that movie.
I'm pretty
at
sure
all.
that movie.
I don't either,
Except
but-
that the dude sounds like Sean Connery, who
Well,
is
was-
the dragon.
It is Sean
It
Connery.
is Sean Connery.
It is okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say
Yeah,
it.
no, the dragon is
But I
Sean
just remember
Connery.
being like, "Give me your heart,"
Yeah.
like to like
No,
some little kid. And I was
absolutely
like,
sick.
"I want to have your heart."
Absolutely sick.
But I think the next thing, the first fantasy that I ever read was definitely Chronicles of Prydain, for sure. And then right after that, I think I read The Hobbit, and I watched all the Lord of the Rings movies before I read them. And then I remember reading The Silmarillion. And then at my 7th grade, they gave you like, because I went to public school for like half a year of 7th grade, and they were like, you can read whatever book you want and do a book report on it. I was like, any book? And they were like, yes. So I read the Silmarillion, and I remember getting one of the dwarven jewels as a necklace, and then like building this little mine or something to like be like, I forget I need to read it again. I forget the dwarf. It was maybe Durin that I was like trying to go and like show.
Probably
this
was,
is
yeah.
This is his emerald that he had. Like I just
That's
remember telling
awesome.
all these other 7th graders who were like reading like, I'm just reading Harry Potter, because that was great too. But yeah, I remember the Silmarillion. I was like, you think Harry Potter's cool? And I read Harry Potter years after that. But
I was late to Harry
that
Potter
was
too.
the next one. Then where do we go? High school now?
Yeah,
And
yeah, just whatever order, but
yeah, I mean, the book that stands out to me from your mom's class and has still stuck with me is definitely Dracula.
Nice.
Bram
Yep.
Stoker. Like, just
Yep.
that whole thing. Because I read that and, like, just listened to Mogwai, like, on repeat. And I would read it in the dark with, like, a little lamp.
Yes.
I was just trying to, like, really get
Yeah,
in touch
dude.
with it. And it was some of the freakiest moments ever, listening to the album Mr. Beast. And, like, just going through it and just feeling scared the whole time. Like, what's the dude's name? Is it
Renfield.
Renfield? Just
Yeah.
being like, I felt like I really identified with Renfield's, like, terror and awe of Dracula the
Yeah.
whole time. Like,
That's so
you
awesome.
are master. Like, it was very weird, but awesome at the same time. So, Dracula, for sure, stands out for all that time. And I definitely read Lord of the Rings inside of all that. But I do think, I agree with what you said. Like, I don't think I got it. Because
think
I
that's
read
one
it
of the-
again in like mid-20s, and I was like, this is so easy to understand, but also, damn.
Yeah,
Like,
no, there's a lot going on that is
so much
like
more.
not, and he's doing like a mythic thing that's like I feel like if you don't kind of know what he's doing, like it just doesn't really come across until you probably just like have more age and
I was
more
gonna say it's
awareness
just
of what's
life
going on.
too.
Yeah,
And, it's you. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Lord of the Rings is that you can listen to it or read it,
Yeah.
watch it as a kid, and
Love
you're
it.
getting kind of the surface level story, which
oh
is
sure,
awesome.
which is great. Yeah,
and
exactly.
it hooks you in, and then
Sword
as
fighting,
you
like-
yeah, but as you grow in age, there's just more to be found in that story.
The thing that also gets me about it is when I was a kid, I loved it, but I felt it was so slow when I was a kid.
Yeah.
When
Sure.
and it's like, man, it's just like, and they're going through the hills and
They're
they're doing this.
singing
But
another song.
reading it as an adult, I'm like, this is action packed. It is like,
Yeah.
and it moves so, the pacing is so good. It is so expertly written, and it makes me so angry when there are people that like don't like the way Tolkien writes. It makes me so mad. And it's obviously if people have other preferences, that's fine. But it's
They're wrong though in this
yeah,
case.
but it's like it's
Like
so
when people
expertly
hate on
paced.
Taylor Swift. Just kidding.
Right, it's the same.
It's the same
yes,
thing.
Tolkien and Swift
Swift
are the
piece.
same.
Under Towers.
Yes.
Same.
Right, right, exactly.
So what about were there any periods for you, Sam, where you kind of stopped reading?
Yes. I think it was when I got into Blink 182. It was like,
Fair.
yeah. So, I don't know. I was into
That's
skateboarding and Blink 182. I was like, no, I'm done with all that nerd shit for a
Yeah.
second. In my heart, I was not, but I thought that was the cool thing to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Plus,
I-
all the guys, I mean, you
yeah.
know,
You just
who
get
I was
bu-
hanging
you
out
get-
with, we just
you
wanted
get-
to skate.
You get busier doing stuff, and then it's just like not spending the time. And I was like, I know for me, I was a pretty slow reader,
Yeah.
and I don't think I'm still all that fast of a reader, to be honest. But it just felt like not a good use of my time. And that being said, I read books in college because I had to,
Right.
Yeah.
although I skipped as many of them as I could.
It
feasibly
was
skip.
only a small pocket of time, and I think most of that was due to just practical stuff because you can't read and skateboard
Sure.
at the same time, and it wasn't like not all of us didn't like it. It was just like we were interested in like punk rock music, or well, I mean punk rock music, Blink 182, that hardcore emo, Sum 41. But I think I am really sad about all that because it happened right as Return of the King was releasing.
Mm.
So I watched it not as enthralled as I was the 3 years before with Fellowship and Two Towers as they were coming out. So I do look back on that and I feel sad because I'm like, dang, I wasn't as invested as I was when I was younger. But I came back around to reading with Vonnegut. Vonnegut got me back reading again because I just loved his satire and how sarcastic he was about everything.
No, his humor's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I was definitely remiss though in not mentioning Star Wars.
Yeah.
It was
Reading?
around 7 or 8. Not reading.
Oh.
I know Steven has, but I
God,
never
that's
read
so
any
deep.
of the
I
books.
don't even feel like we need.
No,
we do
I know.
need to say it,
and I
but
know it's
like,
obvious. There are people that haven't dealt with it, but around 7 or 8. So this would have been after seeing Hobbit for me, but going through with my dad the Star Wars films.
Mhm.
That's the sci-fi
And
foundation.
it's both.
for us.
Yeah,
It's kinda
and
both,
It's
though.
both. And
That
also,
one is-
Star
yeah.
Trek was always on. My grandfather and my dad loved Star Trek, so that was just kind of
Yeah.
on
Like
Next
the TV
Generation.
series?
Yeah, I loved that. So that was definitely that might have been that was actually probably my first entry into
I
to
saw my dad
sci-fi.
watching Star Trek too.
because Star Trek was just on, and it's pretty family friendly. There's like not a lot there, especially Next Generation. I feel like I honestly think
The first couple of seasons, especially, it gets more mature as it
Yeah.
goes on.
but
it is
but
almost a
those were-
family show, which
Yeah.
is really weird.
The biggest
Which
thing
is
though,
fun.
the biggest thing I remember seeing A New Hope, and then like it was like classic '90s. Your buddy telling you about video games or movies you hadn't heard of, so you just had to imagine them, and you couldn't watch it because you were just like there was no access, so you just had to wait until your parents got it for you. But there was and there wasn't internet to make things easy to get a hold of either. But I remember being told the last one's called Return of the Jedi, and I just imagined like a giant eyeball coming out of a swamp. Because again, they were just saying it to me. I wasn't reading it, and I thought it was the Jedi.
Not
Nice.
his eye, not
I
Jed's
was like,
eye.
wow. And again, I was thinking about Dagobah because I
Sure.
had seen the second. So I was like, I know there's a swamp, and there actually is a moment where R2D2 does the
Right.
thing. So
Well,
I
there's
don't know,
the I'm blanking on the name of the creature, but the critter
Swamp
in
monster.
the trash
yes,
compactor.
there is there. He does have an
the
eyeball thing.
eyeball
So maybe
pops
that
up.
I might have been thinking of that too, but I hadn't.
Yeah.
That was before I'd seen the last one. I remember just
That's
being
amazing.
so yeah.
I don't want to see that.
I was like, that sounds crazy.
That's
A
awesome.
It's gonna come
a
back?
Jedi eye.
I love it. That's so good.
And I was like, that's the, and again, not even though the Return of the Jedi is Return of the Good Order.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of it as Return of the big bad villain behind
Yeah.
everything, but
Yeah,
obviously
like
not
somehow
that, but-
Palpatine returns.
Yeah, somehow the Jedi returned.
Somehow it's
Somehow.
back. The Jedi.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's it for me, I think.
So this is a good point for me to jump
Yeah.
in because my first fantasy science fiction memory is absolutely Star Wars. And it's kind of one of those life moments where, and this is silly to say because I was probably 5, but there's like pre-Star Wars and after Star Wars. And I remember specifically, I think I was about 5 years old. My dad came home with a VHS from Blockbuster, and he sat me on the couch, and he said, "Son, this is going to change your life." And it's such a movie moment, but it obviously was 100% correct.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And was completely obsessed with Star Wars from that moment on. Star Trek was a close second after that, and I would almost kind of say that Star Wars was maybe my first dipping my toe into fantasy.
Sure,
and Star
sure,
Trek
yeah,
was
yeah.
first dipping toe into
Sci-fi.
sci-fi because my mom loved Star Wars, my dad loved Star Trek, but like my dad loves Star Wars and my mom loves Star Trek.
Yeah.
So we started, we got the VHSs for Star Wars, and this was back when we still had cable before we cut that, and we would watch Next Generation, Voyager. We never really got into Deep Space Nine for whatever reason.
Yeah, it was.
I know some people absolutely love it, but
I
it
could
never clicked
yeah.
for us. So,
Voyager was pretty good. but
and one of my we watched the Voyager was great. Obviously, Next Generation is the GOAT. The original we watched a lot too, and still to
The
this day
original's
one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever is in the original.
Yeah.
Mirror Mirror, when Kirk gets teleported to like the evil dimension where everybody has goatees.
Oh.
And it's one of the it's not just one of my favorite Star Trek moments, but it's one of my favorite acting moments where you don't associate Captain Kirk with subtle, but there's a subtle little moment that Shatner gives him where he's on the evil version of the Enterprise, and evil Spock is kind of giving him this speech of like, rank advancements happen here in our universe by killing
Yes.
the person above you. And Kirk, being the smartass that he is, essentially is like, well, I'll be waiting whenever you want to give it a try. And stares him down, and evil Spock walks away. And then Shatner turns around and walks past the camera, and he gives this tiny little smirk where you can tell that he's thinking like, you know what? If I don't make it back, I think I'm going to be okay here.
That's so funny.
So I think I'm going to enjoy it here in the evil universe just fine. So yeah, Star Wars, Star Trek.
That episode, because out of all of these, I never watched any Star Trek, but I know about that episode.
Oh, well, I mean, it's where the whole joke of South Park did it. Like, it's the evil universe version where, like, the only thing that's different is they have goatees.
So, just on that, like, the goatees is hilarious, but, like, that theme is so awesome. Like, I feel like the whole show Black Mirror couldn't exist without that type of theme.
Well, and that and Twilight Zone. But it's interesting. Quick, just tiny tangent. The original Star Trek. There's been a lot of talk of like filmmaking improving in TV in recent years, which it has. But if you watch the original Star Trek, the color palettes and the filmmaking of it is really stunning.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny
looks
how
like they're in space.
even though television as a filmmaking entity has improved in recent years, it's actually because it like had devolved from where it was at a point. Because it's the same with Twilight Zone. There's some really like powerful, evocative, just filmmaking for filmmaking's sake. Where there's a great story and characters and writing, but like the way things are shot and blocked is really powerful. But it's interesting how we've like kind of come full circle where that's actually being done again. No,
Star Trek is great.
Yeah.
And that was definitely, I think, my first real dipping my toe into science fiction. And then that's kind of where it stayed for a little while. I figured out reading pretty early, and I started getting into things like one of my biggest reading memories. I went and got an audiobook of it read by a very young Ethan Hawke. Of Call of the Wild when I was way too young for Call of the Wild, and I was absolutely.
How young is too young?
I mean, I was probably 6.
That's so scary. That is so scary.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
And this is the theme of Steven likes the darker stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I'll never forget listening to it the first time and getting to the end, and Buck going in and just massacring that native village, and like the thoughts going through his head of like, he's killed wolves, he's killed other dogs, he's killed a moose, and all these were tough, these were hard fights, and killing a human is nothing. And little 6-7-year-old Steven's like, oh my god,
wow.
But it was fun, and this is going to be a fun whole conversation, because I don't think I've heard anybody talk about this
Murder.
but I think so Call of the Wild was my introduction into naturalism, the style of writing that came about after the Romanticism as far as literature goes. And I see a lot of parallels between that shift to the shift from high/epic fantasy into grimdark fantasy.
Yeah.
The share grimdark and
like this is more real.
Naturalism share a lot of elements. So that kind of laid a groundwork for me, I think, even though it's not a science fiction story at all, it's not a fantasy story, except that, in that you're getting the story from the dog's perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was laying a foundation for me for future things. And then I Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, my dad read both to us, kind of one after the other. And that was another of those moments, like with Star Wars, where it's like there's pre Tolkien, and then there's after.
Yeah.
Like that was not just a milestone; it was like I was a different person after reading those. And that blew the doors off of fantasy for me, and I read as much as I could. There were a lot of things that got missed, but like Chronicles of Narnia. When I was 12, for my birthday, I was given Chronicles of Prydain.
Right.
Still to this day, one of my favorites.
So good.
Devoured it. Redwall. Read all of those books until the last few that he wrote before his death, but all through my teens and tweens, I was reading the Redwall books. And then when I got into high school, even before we started reading them for class, I had read Frankenstein and Dracula because I just wanted to. And my list of reading of science fiction is definitely less than fantasy at this point. I'm looking forward to kind of expanding that. But Frankenstein was another kind of one of those like, oh, okay, I'm different now after having read this book.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we read those books again for literature class in high school. I read a bunch through high school. I read a bunch the first year and a half of college. But then, I went to film school, and after that year and a half, we started making our own movies, our own short films. And then, not just ours, but you're working every weekend on somebody else's film.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden there was just no time Anytime that I wasn't on set, it was, you know, hanging out with friends as much as I could, or doing homework
Yeah.
and the reading that I had to do for that. So unfortunately, there was a pretty big span of time where I really wasn't reading, and I look back on it and I can see it contributed. It was not the sole thing, but it contributed for sure to some darker times in my young adulthood, like just not having that being an active part of my life.
Yeah.
And I'd say that I started getting back into it in a real way in 2020. Not really related to the pandemic. It was just kind of, I was wanting to write a horror script, and I finally admitted to myself that I was a big fan of horror and always had been. And it was just something that I denied because of Christian roots.
Yeah.
And church experiences.
And it's scary.
Well, but again, Steven likes the darker stuff.
Yeah.
And so I bought this giant stack of horror books, and that really kind of reignited a passion for reading. And then, we started our book club, and it's been off to the races ever since. But I think that's kind of my journey. I think there's a lot of parallels, obviously, with the three of us.
Yeah,
and
sure.
We were all reading at the same time.
All at the same time, and the same stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
This is a big question, but what does science fiction and fantasy mean to you guys? And I don't even know that I have a good answer for this, but
Yeah, no, that's great. I really feel like saying what it means to me is really like I always think it puts life in perspective, because like real life has as much magic as fantasy has in it. I guess that's maybe different depending on the science fiction you're talking about, but like it's incredible that it rains and that trees grow, and like, when you're and I guess that is where the science fiction comes in, because when you're like traversing a landscape and it's like feels magical and mythical and wondrous, it's like I think C.S. Lewis and maybe also Tolkien talk about this, but when you see the golden apple, it allows you to realize that apples are just amazing, just on their own, and that's the thing that at the end of the day fantasy does for me, outside of also the heroic aspect, which is also awesome, like just the appeal to like rise up in hard times and to do what's needed to be do. It's just do what needs to be done. I think there's something to just encountering those stories regularly that kind of, it really does kind of like lift you up out of your like day to day. The way Sam talks about, they went through it in those old stories, and we're in our own tale. And it's like it's when you're just doing like an often mundane job, it's.
You mean Sam Gamgee?
I mean Sam Gamgee, not you, Sam. Sam Gamgee.
I wish
Sam
I
Wise.
said
Maybe I should have said Sam Wise.
Sam Wise. It kind of just sounds like you're calling me Wise.
No, but he talks about that. He's in their own tale, and obviously they're on a quest and everything else. But it's like you can that same. It's horribly cheesy, but that same feeling like can kind of just get you through the mundanity of like the drudgery that you have to put up with. But it can. I often find it helps me get through it, and then just to see wonder in the world, because the world as it is very like special, and it just stops feeling special because you're used to it.
Yeah, dang.
I like that a lot. What about you?
Yeah, that's really nice that you said that, because I was going to say like something kind of the opposite, which is like the world is kind of lame, and sci-fi makes it extra special. But hearing
that's valid too.
Well, but hearing what you're saying like kind of brings a full circle for me, because I think I mean, my background of like living in a place I love and then having to move to a place that I did not love, it was really nice to have a sci-fi, I guess, escape. Like,
That's a
this
big
is
part of it too.
this is an extra special thing, and it would be true in this like circumstance that I'm in if a couple of extra special things were true. Like if I focus and get in tune with some special thing, I can make my cup move with my hand. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like taking the existing, I guess, plane that I live in, and then adding a couple little awesome physical, like physics type elements that give you an extra thing. So I thought that's what sci-fi is to me, is giving you an extra little bit of impossibility become possible, and then seeing where that takes you on like a thing. Also, I feel like it kind of captures the aspirational identity of a person, like being able to, I guess, go to a place that, and all the stories are all surrounded by that character. It's an extra special thing, but it's all about this person and how they can become something more for others. Well, what's fascinating to me about the sci-fi that I think is foundational for us, like with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all that, is that all those dudes like were in war and stuff.
Yeah.
And they got back from war and then wrote all these like fun, crazy stories. I feel like that's kind of wild that they did that, and I haven't been able to escape or articulate why that's so interesting. But there's something about that that's very science fiction-y to me, or fantasy to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel all of that. I love the heroics that are inherent with fantasy, especially. I think that's something to aspire to. I like the ability that both science fiction and fantasy have to examine real life problems in an interesting and exciting way, instead of, like you said, kind of the mundanity that can end up happening with real life stuff. You know, the stakes can be a little higher when it's literal dragons.
Yeah.
You know, or a planet ending something. And I don't know, as far as like saying what it means to me, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to parse, because it's been such an integral part of my life for my entire life that it's such an integral part of me that I have a hard time. It's my own question. I have a hard time answering it, because it's like it's so ingrained in who I am.
It means everything to me. I mean,
it kind of does, though. It's like it's part of my DNA at this point. So it's almost like asking, like, what does your liver mean?
How do you feel about your double chromosome? How do you feel about your blood cells?
Liver is actually kind of funnily enough, I'd say probably an apt metaphor, because it's like sci-fi fantasy is often ends up being what I filter a lot of life experiences through.
Like, what would Luke do?
Yeah, well, or just like the viewpoint that I have into the world is shaped by a lot of these stories that I've read or watched or played. Role played. All these different things for literally my whole life. I would quite literally be a different person if it were not for science fiction and fantasy. What about music? That's another thing we all share, is we're massive music nerds. We were all in a band together in high school. What about listening to music while you guys read? You mentioned listening to Mogwai while you were...
That's kind of... I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever gotten back to that level of, like, listening to music while reading. Sadly, I'm trying to think of other stuff, but that was kind of the peak for me.
I almost always listen, and I try to make it match. My funniest story, and the thing that I don't know, you got me Block Parties,
Silent Alarm,
and then we read for school. We read Jane Eyre. The two have nothing to do with each other at all. The only possible
amazing.
connection is that they're both British.
They're English, yeah.
They're
yeah,
both
right.
English. But I was listening to that record nonstop. Still one of my favorite albums of all time.
The teen angst is there.
And
though, for both.
I was just listening to it while I was reading because of the fact that I was listening to it all the time. And to this day, I can't listen to that album without getting the same feeling that I had while I was reading Jane Eyre. And I
Yeah.
haven't read Jane Eyre since. Brilliant book, I just haven't read it. But when I think about Jane Eyre, when I think about the story, even if I'm picturing like the movies, whenever I think about it, I'm hearing Block Party in my head.
That's
So
amazing.
I would assume Mogwai is similar for
Yeah.
you. Do you have
Absolutely.
anything kind of like that, or not necessarily with a sci-fi fantasy book, but
Yeah. So when I was younger, I would often do like movie soundtracks, but that
Sure.
ended up being. I ended up quitting that because you would start, and I did that once reading Lord of the Rings, but then like the soundtrack goes so much faster than the book does, so then you have to like
Yeah, it's not
replay
matching
it. And
up.
I'm not,
And you're
like
like,
thinking of the
I'm not
wrong
seeing-
scene, so like I stopped doing that, and then I would do some classical music. There wasn't like a piece that stand out, but the biggest one was when I was reading the Brian Catling Vore series. There's a Philip Glass album called Aguas de Amazonia,
Yeah.
which is incredible.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like I actually don't know what instrument it is, but it's all this like tippy tapping percussion on like I think a wooden xylophone,
Glockenspiel.
or I think it's a wooden xylophone or
There you
something
go.
like that. And then there's also some like weird
Marimbas?
There's some weird flutes. Maybe it's marimbas. I don't really know exactly, but it's really great. It's really well done. There's some organ in it and some weird little flutes, but it's meant to symbolize, I think, the Amazonian River, and so this book's set in Africa, so jungle in a different part of the world, but it really fit, and I listened to that on repeat, and I both can't read that and do that without thinking of the other.
Yeah,
Nice.
they're attached.
I have a hard time reading with music in general at times, and also especially music with vocals. So I just avoid that altogether. usually, but that book especially, it's like those two they just go together.
Yeah,
And I haven't listened to that album in a while, but it's very,
Fascinating.
very, very good.
that's so.
see, I'm the metal head of the group. Yeah, I listen to a lot of metal while I'm reading. I listen to a lot of metal anyways. Classical is a great option. I remember when we read in high school A Canticle for Leibowitz. Phenomenal book.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to a whole album of Gregorian chanting,
Oh, nice.
which was pretty sick,
is that
actually.
the throat thing?
No, it's like the monks.
Gotcha.
Throat singing is awesome.
Mongolian is the thing.
And I've listened. There's a band, The Who, which is technically a metal band, but they're all acoustic traditional acoustic Mongolian instruments.
not like the actual Who.
No, HU.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Not the Who.
Yeah,
WH.
No, they're
I was like, yeah.
phenomenal, and
I'm
they do
pretty
a lot
sure
of
I've heard of the Who.
yeah. No, this is different.
Oh, this is the Doors. Spelled D.
But that's a more acoustic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't bother me listening to something like that because it's in a language that I cannot even begin to understand. So,
Right.
But yeah, I think as we go along, we'll probably give some musical recommendations for books as we're talking about them.
Yeah. I want to like connect that way again with music in a book.
I love it. It's
It'd be awesome.
I understand it's not to everybody's taste, but it's always been how I do life. You know, I gotta have music in the background. So to kind of round out this segment, we doing top 5?
Yeah.
Sure. Books.
So what are your top 5, starting from 5, current favorite sci-fi fantasy, either books or series can count as one?
Yeah, I think we need to count it as.
Yeah, it has to.
Yeah, because
Has to.
otherwise,
Yeah. I mean, we all, yeah.
it could be done with Lord of the Rings, Middle
Yeah.
it could be done.
I was talking to my folks about this morning, and it almost feels like Lord of the Rings. It's obviously included, but when I was thinking about this list, it was almost like not fair.
Yeah,
It's almost like Lord of the Rings is not on this list because it is above this list.
right. You can't
But-
we shouldn't have talked about Star Wars or Lord of the Rings because
Yeah.
they're just so.
Yeah.
But it's important. So, anyways, so how about we'll go in talking order. So, Daniel, what's your
This is the 10. This is the 10 I'm going to commit to right now, and I'll try to be brief about talking about each one of them, because that would take a long time. So 10 would be The Erstwhile, which I said was 5 earlier, and I'm bumping it all the way down to 10 now that I could have thought about it more.
I mean, bottom is bottom. You know?
Bottom is bottom. That's the thing. It's bottom because the series as a whole is like so flawed, but it's such a cool.
But book 2 is really good.
Book 2 is seriously incredible. I couldn't put it down. And by that I mean I did read it over like the course of a month, but it was like always on my mind at the forefront and just so fascinating. The first book sets up a lot of interesting concepts, but it's just strange and weird. And like a guy gets killed by an abortion. It's very strange. It's just a very strange book.
I mean, you would die.
You would,
if you're
yeah, but it's like a
being
magic ritual type situation, and that's not giving anything away. It's just a thing that happens. But then all that gets set up into this second book that's really fascinating and deals with like this magical alternate history, Africa with this magical forest, and then a lot of the book takes place in London with a guy visiting the famous insane asylum at the time, and it's just very fascinating. And then the third book really just falls off, but that second book is special. My number 9 is The Fifth Head of Cerberus by Gene Wolfe, which is a series of 3 novellas. Which
That's on our list eventually, right?
I don't think it's currently on our list. But
Not
it's
yet,
something we'll
but
get to.
I mean,
it's in the atmosphere.
it's Gene Wolfe, so we're gonna read it.
Yeah, it's just a really fascinating planetary book, planetary science fiction series with 3 relatively short stories that all kind of interlink and is amazing. 8 would be Wizard Knight, also by Gene Wolfe, which is just an awesome alternate worlds fantasy book that we're all going to read together very soon. 7 would be Book of the Long Sun, also by Gene Wolfe. I'm a big fan of Gene Wolfe, which is the second in his Solar Cycle series, and I just recently re-listened to after reading the first time last year, and it is just phenomenal. Then 6 would be The Broken Sword by Paul Anderson, that I just absolutely adored. A super awesome, sort of feels very modern but very old at the same time, take on fantasy set in the Norse mythological world. But a really interesting take on fantasy from a more sword and sorcery lens. That's like an alternate but still very similar to Tolkien.
What's this one?
That was Broken Sword.
Oh yeah, that's on.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, those 2. That's what I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, you're good. The 5th would be Book of the Short Sun, which is the last installment in Gene Wolfe's Solar Cycle, and is
the longest
really
book, actually.
it's actually the shortest of all his. Well, no, it's probably longer than Book of the New Sun, actually, but it's amazing.
He's the
and I
Pringle
can't
guy,
say enough
right?
about it. He's the Pringle guy for sure.
Yeah.
And then 4 would be The Hobbit, which is just kind of unavoidable and phenomenal. And then 3 would be Silmarillion, which I honestly wanted to put higher than this, but I absolutely loved. Then 2 would be Book of the New Sun, which I'm relatively new to, but is quickly becoming like one of my favorite things I've ever read. And then the tops is Lord of the Rings. It's just undeniable and just has to go top. And often want to put Silmarillion ahead of it, but Lord of the Rings actually encapsulates the best things of Silmarillion and told in a way that's just not more effective, but Silmarillion is beautiful for what it's done, what Christopher did with it, but it you can tell it wasn't finished even when you read it, even though the ideas are amazing. I think one of the great tragedies we didn't really get to see what Tolkien really had planned for that book. I think the length of it would have been about the length of Lord of the Rings if he had at least the length of one of the standalone books, which is it's close to that long, but it would probably have been about at least twice as long as it was, and we just would have got a little more detail and a little more. I think it would have been more of a continuous narrative, but by the end of his life, I don't think he was really interested in telling that story. But if they had agreed to publish it at the time Lord of the Rings was coming out, I think he would have finished it. And although it would have ended up looking very different, so we got the stories we got, which is okay. But
we just need the ghost of Tolkien to come and
absolutely.
orate.
Well, that would be my 10. It's a
Nice,
lot of
that's a
Gene
great
Wolfe.
list.
It's a lot of Tolkien.
Love it.
But yeah, Those are my guys.
That's great.
What do you think? You want me to go or you want to go?
You can go,
Okay.
because I might steal some of yours.
Sure. No problem.
I got a couple from you.
So 10 is The Witcher. I
Nice.
love those books, and I'm a massive fan of Witcher 3, the video game. But they're just such a pleasure to read. Those
It's not
books.
on the
They're so
Switch, though, is it?
fun. No, I don't think so.
I need to buy more gaming systems.
So yeah, I love Witcher. I love the character. I love the world, and I love the writing. I think they're just phenomenal stories. Number 9 is Chronicles of Prydain. This could have gone higher, to be honest, but I haven't read it again in a while.
What's his name? Taran?
Taran,
yeah.
Taran Wanderer specifically was had a massive influence on me. I think that was
The
before.
4th book.
Yeah, it was.
High Kings.
It's the
5?
least. It's the least exciting, but it's where the most change happens to Taran.
Before he becomes.
It's like
High King,
the
right?
whole thing is a coming of age story, and
Yeah.
like Taran Wanderer is at least when it hit me hard when I was reading it. So number 7 is the Book of the New Sun. Again, it's another one that I think after some rereads, it probably will go higher. But absolutely stunning. Another thing, kind of like Star Wars, where it straddles that line between sci-fi and fantasy, which is
Yeah.
another reason why it definitely had to be in the top 10. Then First Law by Joe Abercrombie, the original trilogy specifically. Incredible modern grimdark fantasy. Very violent, amazing characters, extremely well written.
Yeah.
Definitely something that we'll be reading together in the near future.
Excited.
Number 5 is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne.
Also, something we're reading, right?
Also, yep, we're reading in June. It's a phenomenal modern. Oh shit! I forgot. I skipped 8. So sorry. 10 Witcher, 9 Chronicles of Prydain, 8 Draenei Saga.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I remember seeing the covers of the first couple books that my dad had when I was a kid, and the artwork just grabbed me immediately.
It didn't have the Gimel Award stamp on it.
No, it was just those paintings.
Yeah.
And then finally reading them now, it's just I love everything about them. They're not necessarily the best written stories. They're very fast paced, which is it's awesome, but it means that sometimes the end feels a little bit rushed. But I love the characters that he writes. I love the world that he's built, and I'm really looking forward to reading some of his other series as well. So sorry, that was 8. Then Book of the Sun 7, First Law 6, Faithful and the Fallen 5. So Faithful and the Fallen, we're reading it soon. It's a very, it's a phenomenal modern heroic fantasy. David Gemmell, who wrote the Draenei Saga, massive influence on John Gwynne, so you can really feel the fingerprints of David Gemmell all over this. John Gwynne really wears his influences on his sleeve, which is something that I love about his books. And it's one other the last thing I'll say about it, very cool element is that it's fantasy. It's heroic fantasy, but very on an epic scale. But instead of being set in like a medieval Europe, it's more set in Celts versus Rome.
Okay.
Europe. So kind of a different time period than a lot of other fantasy.
Like barbaric Celts, or
No. I mean like
before the Roman. Domination.
like their own kingdoms and
Nice.
and culture. But just phenomenal. You guys are gonna love it. Then number 4 is the Pendragon Cycle, which is to this day my favorite Arthurian story. It's we'll see as we dive into the Arthur stories. I may be speaking out of my ass here, but it is the first that I am aware of that was starting to tell the Arthur series, the Arthur story in a historically quote unquote accurate time period. So starting with the end of Rome in Britain and then continuing on where, if Arthur is based on a real person, he certainly was a British warlord that made his name fighting against the Saxons post Rome leaving Britain. So it's set in that time period, but there's a lot of fantasy elements still with
Right.
Merlin and all the magic and everything. It's wonderfully written. Very few people can write violence like Stephen R. Lawhead wrote violence, and those have had a very special place in my heart for a long time. And then number 3 is Frankenstein,
Nice.
the original science fiction story.
I mean, it's classic,
and
right?
it's so good. It's timeless, and the writing is beautiful. Once you get into it, it does not feel like a novel written when it was.
I have not read it.
It's so good.
I think
we'll read it
we
when we start diving into some sci-fi. We're gonna read it
Do
for
some
sure.
classic 9th grade reading.
Yeah. No, it's a phenomenal book. Number 2 is The Chronicles of the Black Company.
Yeah.
The first 3 are definitely my favorite. But I love all 9 of them.
Yeah.
They're just phenomenal books, and it was another kind of earth-shattering moment for me.
Yeah.
I remember I was 19 in New York City at the Borders, when Borders was still a thing at Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
And I was just walking around, browsing, went to the sci-fi fantasy section, picked up this book called The Chronicles of the Black Company. The cover art was sick. I read the first paragraph and I was like, this sounds cool. And I'll never forget sitting in the little townhome we were renting after that, reading it, and I got a few chapters in and just thinking, I have no idea what the hell is going on. I have no idea what's happening in this book,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure this is one of the best things I've ever read.
That's awesome.
And I honestly have no idea how many times I've read / listened to it at this point. I have no idea. That's by Glenn Cook, who will be mentioned many more times on this podcast, and is perhaps, if not certainly one of the most underrated and underappreciated authors in modern fantasy, certainly.
Yeah.
And then obviously, number 1, Lord of the Rings.
Right.
It's got to be. Like, I don't. If
It has
it's
to
not,
be.
you're wrong. Like,
Yeah.
it's just it. Without it, none of the rest of the stuff exists.
It's the
with the
Beatles.
exception, and quite literally, I think with the exception of Frankenstein,
Yeah.
and maybe you could argue the Pendragon Cycle because it's an Arthurian tale.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else on this list exists without Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a reason, and it's so near and dear to my heart. Like, I don't care how much I love any other book. As much as I love The Chronicles of the Black Company, that series will never top Lord of the Rings on
Yeah.
any list like this. So that's just the way it is. It's perpetual, forever, and always number 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my list.
That's great. I think I'll start with the top ones because those are pretty on the nose for me, and I didn't write them down. So
It's all right. Go
going
for it.
down, Lord of the Rings, number 1.
Yep.
But with that, I'll include any Tolkien-esque, like Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings are in the same universe.
That's fair.
So I'll throw that in. The second one is probably Harry Potter, just
Fair.
because
Fair.
everything about that world was so enthralling, and I literally was the same age as Harry every single year. So as they were coming out near the end there, I was like, this is where I'm at. Battling the Dark Lord. So that's number 2. Number 3 is probably Sirens of Titan, that Kurt Vonnegut. It's kind of an offshoot, just one standalone science fiction story by itself. I mean, kind of fantasy in its own right, but more sci-fi than anything. So that would be number 3. Number 4, I would probably put the Book of the New Sun. The moment that Alzabo was talking to Severian in the room, that got me. Like, just that moment out of, what is that? Is that in the book, the first book?
It was the
third
book.
Third,
Yeah,
the moment that happened, I was like, okay, this has just gotten right into my psyche. I love this whole idea of this world. And then the follow-up moment where you find out, oh my God, this is in the future. It's space. It's a spaceship. Like, just all the things about it were very cool. So what am I on? 3, 4? That's 4.
Yeah.
5 would probably be the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy. Did you guys read that?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yep.
Those were so
Phenomenal.
good. Like just the idea that they were like naked the whole time, and like when he came back, he like looked younger from like the place he
Yeah.
was at.
Yeah, it's great.
And then like the weird Satan guy just like ripping frogs' heads off and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, what the hell is this?
No, those were great books.
So I think those are better than Narnia, honestly. I mean, because they seem like more, I guess, grown up in that sense.
Yeah, I get that. It's like
It's kind of dark.
just Narnia's
some of
very is very written for children, and they totally hold up, but they're best through a child's lens. But these are better written books, I think. Overall.
I feel like he was really trying on them. Like,
Yeah,
just
I agree.
reading like he was like, I'm gonna pour all of my.
It's also 3 books,
Yes.
which is another thing. Like, not all. I love the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mhm.
They're not all on the same level of
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
You could probably take the top 3 Narnia books, and they would stand up pretty well against the. I wish I could remember the name
Yeah.
of the name of the trilogy.
Paralandra.
Paralandra
is
was one of
number-
them, but it was like there's a name for the trilogy. and it's
Out of the
completely-
Silent Planet. Oh, the Space Trilogy.
It's
just-
called the
Is it
Space
just
Trilogy. Yeah.
Okay.
Or some people say Cosmic Trilogy too, but I think it's just the Space Trilogy.
I like the Space Trilogy.
Yeah. Cosmic is
But yeah, great addition.
Yeah. So that was number 5. 6 would probably be Chronicles of Prydain, tied closely with Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
Like just
So that's your
Game of
6, 7.
Thrones. Yeah, it's good. 6 and 7. And then I would put I really liked Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Like
Oh, yeah.
everything about them was so much fun. And then what is that, 8? So 9 and 10. Oh, I had these earlier. Oh, I would put Broken Sword at either 9 or 10
Mhm.
because that was awesome. It's just like a one-off. And there's something I'm forgetting. It might be.
Conan for the Grey Apes.
Yeah, for the gray. It might be some Gray Apes, but I don't
Slaughterhouse
know.
5 or something.
For me, it's okay. This isn't. It's not The Witcher, and it's not Elric of Melniboné. It's the white-haired dude. Like I just love.
He's just the white-haired dude.
I love the possibility of that character and how he has to take potions to become something extra, but then he's also kind of extra and can do like hand signs and do crazy ass shit. Like so, something about The Witcher and Elric I really love, and that would be my number 10.
Geralt would kick the shit out of Elric.
So I'd probably have to go with Geralt on that.
I don't know if that's true. That's a bold
No,
statement because of Stormbringer.
Stormbringer is literally like an unbeatable
However,
sword.
I love
If
Witcher so
if,
much.
No, that's
if
fine.
Geralt had Stormbringer, then
Yeah,
absolutely.
game over.
Or if
But-
if they were like, well, if he had Mournblade.
See, what I'm
There
saying
you
is
go.
if
We can
Geralt
give-
Yeah,
and
Geralt
Eric, if they
Mournblade.
met and like just fused, like did some freaking fusion
Yeah.
and became a Vegito sort of character, like I would be like,
but Andrzej Sapkowski definitely has to write it.
yeah, oh, absolutely, because
Yeah,
no,
we'll get into that.
Moorcock, we don't
Okay.
want to, yeah.
I like both of your lists very much. It's
Thank you.
phenomenal.
Same.
Well, fellas, to round out this episode here, we're going to go on to our little fun section for the evening. Not that all of this hasn't been fun, but our silly portion.
Yeah. Time
So
to be
our
silly.
little challenge for this episode was to build a fellowship. So we've each built a fellowship, and then we're going to have a brief debate about whose fellowship would actually succeed in getting the ring to Mordor. Our only rules for this, it's got to be 9. Only Lord of the Rings characters this go around, and only from the War of the Ring era, so no Hobbit or Silmarillion characters. No Tom Bombadil.
Some spill over.
Some spill over. No Tom Bombadil because he's OP.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was-
And no repeats from the original Fellowship. And then in the construction, I wanted to keep this as loose as possible so that we don't just have the same exact list. But you got to have a ring bearer, a quote-unquote wizard, which doesn't have to be a wizard, just a wise leader character, similar to Gandalf.
yeah.
Mhm.
4 warriors,
Okay.
and then 3 supports. And the supports can 100% be
Do you have a
capable
list?
of fighting. I have a list.
Okay. Just can we pass it around when it's our turn?
I have my list.
Oh shoot, not the. Okay. I'm trying to remember the types.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you can look at my list for the types if you want, but
Oh, I see a warrior. Okay,
Yeah,
great,
yeah, yeah.
great.
so
Continue.
yeah. Anyways, the supports. Did I give myself an extra one? I sure did. Okay, I'll cancel that one.
You got 10?
I miscounted when I was putting this together, so that's
Maybe
fine.
one of yours dies.
That's fine. No, there we go. That's 9. So, Ring Bearer, Wizard, 4 Warriors, 3 support. Just like Merry, Pippin, and Sam all get their licks in and are warriors
Yes.
by the end of it. But their main goal going on the quest was to support the Ring Bearer.
Yeah.
Wait, before we get into that, why do
Yes.
you think there had to be 9?
To match the
To combat the
9 ring rates.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it
That's
didn't
what
have.
that's what Elrond
It didn't
said.
have to be, but he just felt. He basically says like he feels like it's poetic.
Well, and in fact, like they weren't even gonna all go all the way
Yes.
necessarily.
Honestly,
Elrond was
they were gonna go at
honestly
least
just
2,
riffing. He was just
Basically.
riffing at the end.
I didn't intend this as I was building it,
Okay.
but this got very Rohan and elf heavy,
Okay.
like almost entirely.
I mean, if you're
Okay.
coming in heavy, you
So
want to
I
come
mean,
with
it's
those.
pretty hardcore. But so all right, so my ring bearer is Faramir.
Okay.
I mean, that's
That's my
Gondor.
ring bearer, too.
That's not.
He's a stud, and if we're going, I don't hate movie Faramir at all. I understand why they made the change.
I
that they
despise
did.
movie farmer.
I don't. I understand why
Wait,
I understand why they made it. Well, let's save that for a different discussion.
Yeah,
Okay. Dang, I want to know why you
We're
hate
just talking
Faramir.
about Book Faramir, and Book Faramir proved that
Yes.
he could withstand the power of the ring.
He had the
Yes.
the quality.
Yes, so he gets the ring to Mount Doom.
At least at a
Oh, that's-
distance.
that's why
That's
he did
exactly
it.
it. Why?
So my wizard character is Galadriel.
Okay.
Galadriel shares a lot of the same strengths as Gandalf, and she also has a lot of the same weaknesses, I think, given her speech to Frodo when he offers her the ring.
Yeah.
So I think there's some parallels there. I think she would fill that role well.
Mm-hmm.
My warrior characters, and I am super pumped, honestly, about these 4. I've got Glorfindel,
Mm-hmm.
Haldir,
Yeah.
Eomer, and Erkenbrand.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah. So 4 studs right off the bat. And then my supports are pretty studly too, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've got Eowyn and then the duo of Elladan and Elrohir.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I like it.
So that's my fellowship. I feel pretty good about it. I didn't like I said, I didn't intend for it to be all Rohirrim and elves.
Yeah.
But you know,
I mean,
I'm not complaining either.
There's a lot of crossover with mine. Well, I'll just go into mine.
for it.
Yeah. So my ring bearer is the same. I already said it. It's Faramir. I feel like I'm curious because it doesn't sound like Sam chose him as his ring bearer. So I'm curious to hear it. But it feels like the obvious choice. The only other character that really could withstand the ring, it's similar to Gandalf where he just doesn't want to deal with it. But it feels like if anybody else was going to be able to like carry it, other than Frodo, I guess Sam would be the other one you could go for, but obviously we're excluding other members of the Fellowship. My wizard is actually, I'm going for Glorfindel as
Nice.
in my wizard role. The only guy to come back from death, like other than Gandalf,
right.
and the only other character we know to defeat a Balrog, other than that's still around. So
Yeah.
like, I feel like that works. I did think of Elrond and Galadriel both make a lot of sense, and they're also the only other characters with the other Elven Rings of Power. But I do think their Rings of Power are more tied to their places than Gandalf's was,
Correct.
which as a wanderer. So I felt like that made sense to go there. And then also, I'm not sure Elrond has his fastball anymore.
No,
So
I
like
don't think so.
I think not including him makes sense. I do like your pick of Galadriel, but I wanted to go Glorfindel. I remember, if for no other reason, then I remember being so mad he wasn't going on the quest when we first read the book. I was like
Yeah.
furious.
Who? Glorfindel?
Glorfindel,
It's
yeah.
like, what is he doing?
Yeah, because he's
What
like
is he doing?
because obviously in the book it's him and not Arwen that come and save Frodo, and you're just like, this dude is like the coolest ever,
Right.
And nope, we're just done with him.
I was
Okay.
like, I got something this weekend. I can't go. Imagine Russell Brand playing him.
So, and this is something I did for myself where I've got my 4 warriors, and one of them I've dubbed my returning king in my sort of semi-Aragorn role, and I'll say that last though. But my warriors, I've actually got Eladan and Elro here as my warriors.
Nice.
I've also got Erkenbrand. I felt like he was undeniable.
Yep.
As the like Rohan captain. And then my last warrior and also my returning king is Dane, who I've got
Nice.
Oh, nice.
coming back to Lonely Mountain. Technically already king of Lonely Mountain, but he's going to go back to
He's
Lonely
like,
Mountain later.
Okay, fine.
But he's also going to be, I felt like I needed a dwarf. I needed that ruggedness, and I felt like he can still go it. And then for my support, these also they're hardier for the most part than maybe the support is in the main fellowship, but we're just going to go for I'm taking Quick Beam. I want an int. I want that knowledge and wisdom, and Quick Beam is not going to slow us down like Treebeard or some of the others where he's he's
awesome.
just hasty enough. And is he going to kick butt when we need him? Probably.
Absolutely.
But I felt like he's also going to be like
an int.
a sage wisdom. I'm taking Farmer Maggot with me. I need that
dude.
level of
resourcefulness.
and like willingness to just like go for it.
Yeah.
I'm taking Farmer Maggot with me. I had to have Farmer Maggot, and I needed a Hobbit, at least one.
Yeah.
I felt like I needed a Hobbit. And then
Gandalf
lastly,
needed like 4. Like you
Yeah.
have to have 1.
and then lastly, he's definitely a warrior, but I wanted Baragond. He's wise. He's there. He's not there for primarily be a warrior. He's there to give counsel and wisdom to Faramir in hard times. And I felt like I had to have that. I did consider Halbarad, who is the other ranger, Aragorn's right-hand man ranger, but he just barely didn't make the cut because I felt like I had to have both elf brothers. If I could have done one elf,
Yeah, for sure.
I might have included Elbrad. But I thought Erkenbrand, I couldn't justify cutting Erkenbrand for Halbarad. So there's my 9.
I love
great.
it. I think your list is actually more fun than mine, to be honest.
Thank you.
I didn't do the homework on this one, so I have to do a little bit of riffing here.
Yeah.
But I think I want my ring bearer to be Bilbo.
Okay.
I want
Bilbo's
him-
coming back.
I want him to
Old
go.
man Bilbo.
I want him to go full circle. He's got the ring. He's got some magic stuff.
I
but-
did consider it. I did
so
consider
here's
it.
the thing. It's really closely tied with the support, which, in my scenario, I want to be Arwen. I feel like she can have some stuff
Okay.
with Bilbo, like, listen, bro, we're not going to really destroy it, and kind of just, like, lead him on the whole way. And then
And
at
then
the
just-
last minute, Arwen gets to go full circle for her dad and be like, I'm just going to overcome Isildur and just throw the thing in. Because, to be honest, the ring bearer never makes it. They just don't. Frodo didn't make it. I don't see anyone actually making it. For Bilbo, at least Arwen can make him make it, and then it'll be full circle in that sense. So Arwen's my support in that scenario. I think I want Elrond to be the wizard simply because he failed, and like we need him to like not fail one time. And I don't feel like his character makes a lot of sense in not wanting to like redeem that, like being
Sure.
like, I already did this before. All right, whatever. I'll just go to the Grey Havens. You know what I mean? Another one of my warriors that doesn't really make sense is I want Celeborn to be in there because I feel like he gets Celeborn, whatever.
You're
Because
fine.
I'm like, come on, like he's
He
awesome.
just doesn't. Yeah.
And he doesn't
kicks
even
butt.
exist in Rings of Power. Like, where is he? He's
Yeah.
supposed to be like her husband.
Very fair.
So I want him to be one of the warriors. So that leaves me 3 supports. I want Farmer Maggot as well because of the resourcefulness. And I also want the guy that is the gatekeeper at Bree because I feel really sad about how he just like dies.
Okay.
And I feel like I feel like he would be a good support.
That's 2 people that stood up to ring wraiths too. So
That's what I'm saying. Like, it takes some balls to do that.
It does.
So that's 3 supports. I got 1 more support. I got 3 more warriors.
You got 3 sports. You're good with sports.
I'm good with supports?
Yeah, it's only 3.
So I need 3 warriors, right?
Yeah, 3 more.
Faramir, for sure, because he's awesome. I would pick Eowyn as a warrior, too, because she actually kills the Witch King, so we want her to be a part of that. And then I would definitely pick any int at all to be a warrior, because, like, how overpowered is that?
End.
Like, just the fastest one. Like, seriously, like, send them in, like, Balrog, like, well, maybe not the Balrog because of the fire, but, any amount of orcs.
Yeah, and Intin Moria might be weird, but we'll make
Tough
it.
to
We'll make
get
it
there.
work.
But honestly, like they could have probably like gotten over they wouldn't have had to go through
Yeah.
more like the birds or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
The ant would have been able to just walk them straight through.
Or actually,
Yeah, true.
pause. Forget the ant. I want the freaking eagles, bro.
You're gonna take an eagle from day
I
one.
want an eagle, like just not to fly us there, but just like to be
Just being
available
around. Okay.
Like hey,
Yeah.
like just tap on his shoulders, like okay.
Okay.
I'm not gonna take you to Mordor, but like we could probably fly around these mountains. Like surely, we could just like fly over.
Also, I know I'm
Fangorn.
doubling back, but I did envision Baragon in my Samwise role as the Samwise to Faramir.
So that's why I had to
I
clarify.
thought-
I want
yeah,
Arwen to be the one.
Arwen is the Samwise to
carry
Bilbo.
Bilbo up, like okay, and she would have never partnered with Gollum, and like that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's
Get rid of
although
this
it
guy.
is how it worked out.
It is, but that's also Frodo making decisions. I'm just saying, I think Arwen would have gone the whole way because she ultimately wants to just be with Aragorn. You know, her
Mhm.
motive is to be with that dude,
Yeah.
and so the ring is like an adjacent thing. I think a fun thing to ask too is what would the rest of the Fellowship be doing if this was the Fellowship?
Frodo would be
The Master of
staving
Bag-In?
off the Saxville Bagazins from taking over Bag-In.
Knowing that Bilbo's on a quest of
Knowing that
some
Bilbo's on a
ridiculous
quest.
adventure. You know,
Gimli would just be back at the Lonely Mountain chilling, not being friends with Legolas, who would just be in
Well, Gimli would have ended
the
up.
woods.
Gimli would have ended up with all the rest of the dwarves
In the fighting wars. Yeah.
That was honestly, I
Wars in
wanted
the
to
North.
bring a dwarf, but I couldn't think of a dwarf that wasn't like actively involved in this other
helping
massive
yeah.
battle that was wildly important.
Yeah.
Which is that's silly to go there, but
Yeah.
The fact they spared Gimli is massive,
yeah.
Well, it's just one guy, and he was already there.
but he's
These,
like kind of a noble dwarf.
Yeah.
These are
True.
phenomenal lists. So now the question is, which fellowship is most likely to succeed?
I don't know. I think Faramir is a really good ring bearer.
I was gonna say-
like, I think out of the people that come back without a support, I think Faramir makes sense.
Yeah,
Like he's good enough to make it the whole way, which doesn't make sense because he's a man, and that shouldn't be possible.
but
Right?
he's a ranger,
right, but
and
know what I mean?
and he has the heart. I'm biased, perhaps. I think that perhaps my list has the best chance of getting the farthest, just as far as the number of Studley characters in it.
True.
yeah,
However, I think that Daniels is the most fun.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, and having an Ent with me, it's gonna have some advantages, but yeah, the more I think about the Ent and Moria, that's a tough
Well,
tough
and
one.
I-
Well, maybe we go a different path. then.
Yeah,
Maybe
well, that's
we
what
go
I'm
a
saying.
different
With
path.
an
You have
Ent,
an
an Ent, you just go straight through Fangorn.
Yep, we're just
You
gonna go
go-
straight
you
through
go
Fangorn,
to
and
the-
we're not
the
gonna worry
trees,
about
there
it.
you go.
You go towards Rohan, but
Yep.
instead of going into Rohan, you just go straight into Fangorn,
Yeah,
and
Or
the
any
Ent,
forest.
the Ent leads you directly.
I
through
think
it.
I think between yours and mine, it just comes down to Glorfindel and Galadriel, and who really like expresses themselves perfectly in that role, the wizard role, and I do think. I think both of them are going to have a little bit of a tough time filling the Gandalf role of like uniting the Rohan and solving that. So that's the part where like all of them I think are going to have both fellowships are going to have a tough time.
for sure, and it also, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of just looking at it as purely as like the original intent of the Fellowship. If
Yeah.
they could make it to Mordor. and
Yeah,
destroy
not
the
for,
ring.
yeah, no, that's fair.
And there ends up being a lot more in the books that has to happen, and
For sure.
that saves Middle Earth.
No, that's very fair.
But yeah, I think that mine maybe fulfills the mission, but again, I hate to say it, I don't think that Farmer Maggot makes it very long. But I absolutely love that he's in your list.
Yeah, he's maybe like my Boromir, and
Yeah, probably.
he tries to
And his death really
Many arrows.
yeah, many arrows trying to save Quickbeam.
his death though really like cements the Fellowship.
Yeah, that's
together.
what I think. That's what I think happens
Oh man,
too.
I don't know who's my Boromir. Not the eagle.
Probably the eagle. Yeah, getting in a fight with one of the flying wraiths, probably saving their
that's
crew.
the thing. That's the thing to contest against.
Yeah.
Man. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening. This is Under Towers, our first episode. Boys, cheers.
Cheers.
This was awesome. So much fun. I'm excited for this new adventure.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you? I am Citizen Insane on Instagram. That's pretty much the only social thing that I do.
I am the Mighty Oak on both Instagram, which I don't really use much, and Twitter or X, whatever it's called now.
It's X. X, but Twitter.com still works. I'm just Sam McLeod with an underscore before that. But I'd rather you follow us here.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Namarie.
Woohoo!